Greetings everyone, thank you for coming to my channel. In this video you'll be learning when to use was and when to use were. Was and were are used to talk about a past state of being or to give info about something or someone. These two words will always be used when talking about something that happened in the past. I'm going to elaborate on how to use both was and were, but one thing I like about both of these words is how you can't misuse them. Well, you can, but it won't sound right. For example, if I say they was at the store, like obviously that doesn't sound right. But if I said they were at the store, that sounds right. So I'm gonna give you guys a few examples just to get your brains going. So was is used with singular subjects. So I was going to the store, or he was going to the store, or it was going to the store. And you can also use someone's name, like Sally was going to the store. What throws me off is how you is considered singular and plural at times. It makes sense, but it can still throw you off. For example, you can use you when talking about one person or a group of people, but you will never be used with was. And it's kind of weird because you seems like it would be singular. But I've accepted the fact that English is kind of weird and confusing at times, but it's also interesting and fun. Okay, so where was I at? Okay, were. Were is used with plural subjects. They were going to the store, we were going to the store, or you were going to the store. It's weird because when we say you were going to the store, we could be talking about one person, or if we said you all were going to the store, we would be talking about a group of people. Okay, so was is used with singular subjects, singular nouns, and singular pronouns, or a person's name. And the singular pronouns are I, he, she, and it. Example 1 says I was tall in kindergarten. Notice how the subject is singular, and that's why we use was. And also notice how this sentence is something that happened in the past. Example 2 says she was being rude to me. The subject she is singular, and that's why we used was. And notice how this is something that happened in the past. She was being rude to me in the past. Example 3 says Billy was born in 1998. Notice how the subject Billy is singular, and that's why we use was. And this is something that happened in the past. Billy was born in 1998. Also, I like saying singular subjects. Some people say singular nouns and pronouns, but I feel like that kind of throws me off, so I just say singular subjects. They're kind of the same things. Only the subject is the person or thing doing the action, and a noun is a person, place, or thing, and a pronoun pretty much replaces a noun. Subjects can also be pronouns, but not all the time. Were is used with plural subjects and plural nouns and pronouns. Our plural nouns are we, you, and they. Example 1 says they were married for 10 years. So our subject, which is also a pronoun, is they. It's a plural pronoun, and that's why we used were. And notice how this is something that happened in the past. They were married for 10 years. Example 2 says my friends were with me when I got shot. So notice how friends is the subject and it's plural, and that's why we used were. And also notice how this is something that happened in the past. Example 3 says at the concert we were all shouting. Notice how we is a plural pronoun, and that's why we used were. And also notice how this happened in the past. We were at the concert shouting in the past. Wasn't and weren't are past tense contractions. Wasn't is short for was not, and weren't is short for were not. The same rules that apply for was apply for wasn't. Both are used with singular subjects and singular nouns and pronouns, like I, he, she, and it. Wasn't sentence examples. So example 1 says she wasn't at the event because she was sick. So notice how the subject she is singular, and that's why we use the wasn't. And notice how this is also something that happened in the past. And also notice how wasn't is a contraction word that means was not. So you could also say she was not at the event because she was sick. You don't have to say that, but just to double check if you're using the correct contraction, you could do that. Example 2 says, I wanted to perform, but I wasn't ready. So notice how we use the singular pronoun I, and that's why we use wasn't. And also notice how this is something that happened in the past. Also notice how we use the contraction word wasn't, which is the same as saying was not. Example 3 says, I tried to feed the stray dog, but it wasn't hungry. So notice how it is a singular pronoun, and that's why we use wasn't. And also notice how this is something that happened in the past. And example 4 says, Jessica wasn't willing to speak to the police. Notice how our subject Jessica is a singular noun, and that's why we used wasn't. And also notice how this is something that happened in the past. Also, for those of you guys that didn't know, contraction words are just shortened words like can't, wouldn't, wasn't, weren't, didn't. And if you want to know more about contraction words, I have a video on contraction words, so feel free to check that out. Also, contraction words are used for informal settings. In formal settings, you will write the whole word out, and informal settings, you will use contraction words. Weren't is used with plural subjects and plural nouns and pronouns, like we, you, and they. Example 1 says you weren't doing your job, and that's why you got fired. Notice how you is plural, and that's why we used weren't. Also notice how this is something that happened in the past, and weren't is a contraction word for were not. Example 2 says, I've attended 2 concerts in my life, and they weren't entertaining. Notice how they is plural, and that's why we used weren't. Also notice how this is something that happened in the past. And also notice how we use the contraction word weren't, which means were not. And example 3 says, I got arrested for fighting, and my friends weren't happy with me. So notice how friends is plural, and that's why we used weren't. Also notice how this is something that happened in the past. And also notice how we use the contraction word weren't, which means were not. Thank you guys for coming, and thank you guys for your support. I hope you found this video informative. If you did find this video informative, please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe, or all of the above, and I'll see you next time.